Well, everybody, we appreciate your time and the fact that you're taking some of your day to join us. We think this is going to be a very useful presentation, and we just want to acknowledge your presence, so thank you. As Nelson mentioned, my name is Daniel Morrison, and I focus on business development for Software One Services team, and really just want to give you guys a quick snapshot into who Software One is in the event that you aren't familiar with our story. So to begin with, we've been for 25 years, and we are a licensing solutions and services provider that has a unique combination of being truly a global organization that is explicitly focused on software and related services. We work with our customers to optimize and manage their software spend while facilitating relationships between our customers, their software publishers, and local best-of-breed service partner communities. Software licensing and managing your software assets is certainly complicated enough, and the dynamic nature of the software industry only compounds the complexity for most of our customers. And our experience has really shown that to us, to truly understand and address our customers' needs and challenges, a partner must be fully focused on being a licensing specialist. And as a company, if I had to boil everything down when it's all said and done, I would say that our goal is to provide our customers with clarity and confidence with regards to their IT roadmap. Again, clarity and confidence with regards to their IT roadmap is what we're all about. And as a company, let me just give you guys a few statistics, and I'll hand it off to our presenter for the day. We're sitting at about 1,700 employees around the globe, and we are growing quite fast. We have local feet-on-the-street presence in 82 countries, so if you are a global organization, we can certainly have meaningful discussions with you. We have relationships with over 4,000 publishers from a reselling perspective, and we wrapped up last year with over $4 billion in sales. And really, per today's call, I want to bring the attention here is that we are the largest software asset management services provider in the world, with typically on average of more than 1,200 projects performed annually, from software asset management related services, compliance assessments, working with our customers to kind of build out their internal asset management programs. We do a whole heck of a lot of work here and would love to share some of our experiences with you today. Now, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rob Froelich, and he's going to walk you through today's webinar, again, focusing on the 6 signs of an upcoming publisher audit. And Rob is one of our senior consultants. He has been in the industry for a very long time and has a lot of experience dealing with very complicated audit-type scenarios. So I'm going to hand it over to Rob, and he will lead us along, and I'll come back and wrap things up at the end. So, Rob, over to you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you to everyone that's joining us today. Well, one thing I can say, I won't promise that talking about publisher audits is going to be exciting, but I will promise that it's important to your business. It is an essential it's an essential function within your business you're going to be aware of and be prepared for. So when that day comes and you get those audit letters, you know what to do. You know how to be prepared before that comes, and you can predict with some greater level of certainty what your risk is with respect to publisher audits. So first, what I'm going to start with is I'm going to give you just a real quick definition around what software license audits are. I'll give you a little bit of the research around how do publishers choose who to audit. We're going to talk through, I'm going to expand on that a bit in terms of what are 6 of the most common audit triggers that we've seen in our practice over the last few years, and kind of what are the trends in those triggers. And then I'm going to wrap up with what are some things that I can do as a company to prepare for that eventuality. And if I get that letter or if I get that compliance request from a publisher, what are some of my most important first steps? So starting off, and let me stop here real quickly. I'm hoping that all of you can see the Q&A tab on your screen. Please go ahead and keep your questions coming because we really want to be able to customize this webinar to the kinds of things that you're concerned about and the kinds of questions that you have on your mind. So the sooner you can get those questions into the queue, the better we can get through those questions at the end of the presentation once I get through this step. So what is a software audit? It's a request from your publisher of software that you may have bought recently, you may have bought a long time ago, based upon contracts that you have in place with that publisher or general copyright law that those publishers have to that software. I would caution most folks too, not everything that really is an audit is always called an audit. There's a lot of activity going on today of publishers saying, oh, we'd like to do this SAM engagement for you, we'd like to do this compliance check. There's a lot of different names for it. When it comes down to it, those are all really different kinds of audits, and are really one way for publishers to exercise their rights as copyright holders to the licenses that you're using to their software. So who's getting audited today? Today, I would be surprised if among the attendees here, if there's really anybody in attendance who hasn't gotten at least one publisher audit. Because starting back in 2007, we really started to see compliance activity and audit activity take a marked step forward, an increase in volume. And that, according to Gartner, about 50% of companies were getting at least one audit request in a 12-month period. That doesn't mean that over time only 50% were getting it, but every year at least 50% were getting it. By 2011, that was up to 65% were getting at least one request. And then in our survey that we conducted in 2013, we were looking at close to 70% of our clients were getting at least one publisher audit request. And it's becoming more the trend that clients are reporting that multiple publishers have approached them for some sort of audit or compliance request during that time. There we go. Sorry about that. So how are publishers choosing who they're going to audit? And I wanted to really give you a little bit of access to some of the research that publishers are relying upon. And these tables that I've chosen to use in this particular instance are taken from research, one conducted by KPMG, another conducted by Ernst & Young. It's probably a little hard to make out the footnotes at the bottom, giving them credit for their tables, but those belong to those companies, and we use them under fair use. But to give you an idea, these are from research that they compiled that was directed at publishers about how to obtain software revenue and how to find revenue through that compliance stream. And KPMG was identifying, sales account team nomination as the number one reason that publishers were selecting customers for audits. Ernst & Young was finding the number one reason being inconsistencies in purchasing behavior. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unpack some of these, what looks like fairly dry statistics, and really put them in a perspective that I think you'll be able to relate to, that will relate more to things that you can know about your business, things that you can measure, and things that you can use to predict. And those are those 6 signs that we'll be talking about. So these are some of the signs of an upcoming audit that are really the heart of our content today. So first and foremost, that sales account team nomination that KPMG speaks about really boils down to when there's a transaction going on, or there's an expected purchase or an agreement that your account team is put in their forecast, or they've been talking with you about, or they've heard is going to happen. When it doesn't happen, that's, I would say, probably the number one reason that our clients are getting audited is some deal was supposed to happen, some expansion in licenses was supposed to happen. It didn't happen. Next thing you know, somebody from the compliance team or the license management team or whatever they call it at that publisher is knocking on your door saying, hey, you've been selected for this random compliance exercise or whatever they're calling it that day. I'd say the next most common reason that publishers are coming into audit is kind of a scary one a little bit, is that the publisher is audited before, and I'm sure a lot of folks here in attendance have had this happen, where the publisher has been in one particular year, there's been a shortfall that's been identified. It's been difficult to get all the data together, or the publisher has become aware of limitations that a company might have in controls of how software is deployed or in how they're keeping track of things. You can bet if those things are present and they're causing deficiencies to be present in terms of license inventory versus deployment, that publisher is going to be back at the next opportunity. So I would say don't rest on the publisher did this audit and now we're fine. So now we're compliant, we're good, we don't have to worry about them. I would say count on this if there's provisions in your master contract with them, count on them being back, and probably about as soon as they can under the provisions of that contract, if there's any limitations. If they're not, count on them being back within the next 12 to 18 months for another engagement. Some of the other things that that compliance teams are going to be looking at when they're choosing who to audit, because obviously they've got limited resources. They need to be strategic about how they determine who's going to be the subject of their audits. So they're going to be looking at all of their customers and all the companies out there that they work with to identify, based on size, based on spend compared to similar businesses. They're going to be looking for those companies that maybe, hey, it's a 20,000 person company, but its spending is really on a par with a 3,000 person company. That's going to raise a red flag with those compliance organizations. Or if you've got two companies that are very similar, two financial firms in a similar segment, similar business model, one spends, $5 million a year, another spends $800,000 a year, you can bet somebody on the compliance team is going to flag that $800,000 spender as a potential compliance target. Another thing they're going to be looking for too is that a lot of times publishers will have products that go together, and you may have an ERP system that requires a particular database, or you may have an application development tool that generally goes with a particular type of server or something like that. If those products aren't being purchased in the ratios that the publisher will generally expect, that's a red flag to those compliance folks. So you can expect that the compliance people within the publishers that you're working with are going to be doing analytics against your purchasing behavior to figure out if you're, sort of more or less than some of your peers, and what's really the makeup of what you're buying. The other thing that's going to be that's going to kind of move companies to the short list for compliance exercises and audits is very frequently merger acquisition and divestiture activity. So we all know, we've all been through mergers and acquisitions, and we know it's very complex, and there's a lot going on and a lot of assets going back and forth and a lot of horse trading and negotiating that goes into that. Very frequently, the details of software transactions don't necessarily get exchanged in as intentional a way as they need to really maintain a really strong compliance position. And if you're in a merger acquisition sort of mode right now, it's really a good thing to be looking at for, hey, how am I covering off on the risk associated with this transaction? Pardon me. While you're going through that, sometimes some of the documentation can be difficult to move from one organization to the new one. And in many cases, many publishers are going to have very, very specific policies that must be followed very carefully in order to transfer those licenses from one legal entity to another. And if those are not followed, and the publisher does come in to do an audit, those can be viewed as deficiencies that would end up as an expense to that new company. Some of the other things that are going to flag, and these are kind of my last two, my big 6 signs. Some of those things are going to be identified by: are you purchasing licenses that are difficult to track? Licenses with indirect use. Database licenses are really good examples of this, where they have either client access or named user licenses. Very difficult to track and have metrics that are designed so that indirect use is a very important part of that need for license, but it's very difficult to keep track of. Or any other licenses with very complex metrics based on processors, cores in complex clustered or virtualized environments. Publishers are going to be looking for folks that are buying those types of licenses from a compliance perspective, rather than the ones that are simple, that are based on, hey, let's count the number of installs on desktops. That maybe it's easier to manage, less likely to be a concern to some of those publishers. If you have a low percentage of software maintenance, so what often happens, there's a number of desktop tools out there where you don't necessarily have to buy software maintenance or support with those. Many of our clients do not, because for whatever reason it's not of value to their organization. But we need to be aware that when maintenance and support is not being purchased, that's going to be a red flag to the compliance people, because they realize that maintaining multiple versions of a particular piece of software is going to be complex for the organization, and that's going to increase the potential margin of error. So say you own a 2008 version, a 2009 version, and a 2012 version in different quantities. They want to come in and make sure that if you don't buy support and you're not entitled to move those versions around, that that you're tracking the right numbers of the right version that you've got, which is difficult to do. One of the other things they're going to be looking for in your purchase history is whether you're doing a lot of ad hoc, a lot of very transactional type of purchasing, or very decentralized purchasing. That's going to be a red flag to compliance folks, that maybe you don't have a lot of ability to keep track of those purchase details, and maybe you don't have access to what somebody bought on their credit card or on their P card, or what some departmental organization went and did to set up an application server or something like that. So those are all things that the compliance teams within the publishers are going to be looking for to identify who to audit. The last thing that I would really drill into is, so when your business is going through significant changes, so say in a news release, because this is another thing compliance folks are going to be looking at, not just your quarterly and annual filing, but also if you're making press releases about hiring in a particular area. Maybe you added a bunch of call center people, or you added a bunch of field agents, or something like that. Those publishers are going to be looking for proportional license purchases going along with that, or that's going to be a red flag on the compliance side. That's going to cause you to really increase the chance that you're going to be audited. If there's major reorganizations that are showing up either in financial reporting and news releases, things like that, a lot of things shuffling around, that's going to be something that compliance folks are going to be looking for as an opportunity to audit. The last thing I would look at is, this is especially important for global organizations, but it really applies to any organization. If you're launching a new line of business, you're launching new geographic markets, new operational centers, things like that, that's going to be something that publishers are going to look at as opportunities to say, they're moving into this new market. How do we know they're using some of the same technologies that they acquired from us in other areas? How do we know that they're doing this, that they're managing those licenses appropriately? And this may be a good opportunity for us to go capture some revenue. So you've kind of gotten a little bit of a theme that I'm hinting at. And, now I'm really just going to be very direct about it. So why are publishers conducting so many software audits? If you haven't already kind of gotten the hint, audits equal revenue. So it's, like it or not, today, a fairly significant amount of software license revenue is coming from compliance activities that publishers are undertaking. In the research that I'm looking at here from KPMG, 48% of the publishers in that survey reported 4 or more percent of their revenue from compliance. Now, I look at that number and say, well, 48% had at least 4% of their revenue from compliance. Probably a lot more than that, because there's probably a lot of compliance-related revenue that's probably not getting reported in that 4%. And they're probably only reporting the license revenue and not things like maintenance and support and ongoing subscriptions that would follow on after that one compliance event. So it's a lot more revenue coming out of compliance than I think is showing up in financial reporting for large software firms across the world. So in publisher new license revenue, like I said, generally accounts for about half of software revenue. If we were to go look at Oracle's latest financial reporting and look at their overall revenue, new licenses are less than half of that software revenue because of that back end, that maintenance and support stream that is so critical to Oracle's business. So I would say, rather than what this study is reporting here, I would say at least 48% of publishers for this study are probably generating somewhere closer to 10%, probably 8 to 10% of their license revenue, or of their software revenue from compliance. And that should get people's attention to say, wow, this is a big part of revenue. And at some organizations where new license sales aren't so strong, maybe they don't have the most popular technology, maybe they're in a technological niche that's really being replaced by something else. We found there's a few publishers like that really compliance revenue is probably the majority of their revenue because there's not a lot of new licenses going out the door, and everybody kind of knows it, but they're staying alive through compliance. So those are situations where you really want to be well prepared and realize that software publishers aren't just selling to you through their software reps and their account team. Software reps, they're also coming in and doing what is more kind of a strong arm sales, saying, hey, we know it's difficult to keep track of our software. We know these metrics are complicated. We're not really interested in making them a lot less complicated because that might make us less money. So you just need to pay up. So what we'd like to do with our clients is help you to be more prepared, to be able to say, you know what, hey, I'm not writing you a blank check when I buy your technology. I'm going to spend what I budgeted. I'm going to manage it well, so that when we put together a financial arrangement and I'm getting value for your software, I'm going to pay you for that a fair amount, a negotiated amount, and we're not going to play around with these other ways of dragging out revenue I didn't anticipate. So what are some things that we can do before an audit to be prepared? One of the most important things to do is keeping track of that proof of that transaction, that proof of entitlement for every single piece of software that anybody ever buys or uses in your organization. I can't stress how important that is, and how often those pieces of data get lost or are not don't have a process around which they're captured for the organization. So when the compliance event happens, you may have spent money and you may have bought licenses, but if the proof of entitlements aren't there, don't rely on the publishers to track that for you. You need to make sure that you've got a really good plan in place for how that proof of entitlement is going to be there, whether it's through a single vendor that's maybe your reseller that's giving you a data source to be able to track that, whether it's a system where you're loading all of those transactions into. Have something where you can keep track of a paid invoice or some other artifact of that transaction. So have a policy about who can use what kind of software, how it can be used, and how it can be acquired. Extremely important that be enforced within an organization. It can be adapted, obviously, to your culture, to your specific type of business, but it's very important to know kind of where you stand and say, hey, this is what the rules of engagement are, and this is what we're going to do for good corporate stewardship so that we're not wasting money, we're not buying lots of different kinds of software that maybe don't contribute to our overall business goals, and we're also not buying software in an uncontrolled way, where we end up with a lot of software left on the shelf or used for a short time and then just not utilized anymore. Well, the next thing I would say is know those license terms, and that's not easy. Knowing how users or installations are counted is very challenging. The metrics are often very complex. Software One has developed a very robust team of licensing experts to help our clients with that. So I guess that's kind of my pitch for us is, hey, it's good to know your license terms. If you need help with that, we have a ton of folks that really know this really well that can help you to get very clear on what those license terms are, how the best ways to count those, the users, the installations, whatever the metric that is. And I would say, last of all, keep that ongoing inventory of what you have deployed. Whether it's through, whatever tool you end up using, make sure that you've got something that's organization-wide for your most important, I would say, for the things that you spend the most on, or the things that are the most difficult to track. Keep that ongoing inventory, because when that audit comes, that's not the time to be gathering that inventory. That's already too late, and it's going to cost you more in that. There are ways to limit your exposure once you're being audited, but it's a lot more efficient to do this preparation ahead of time, and that's the best way to save your money, is to have a plan before you're audited. So if those things are hard to do, if those are hard questions to answer, and I know for many organizations that I work with, those are really hard questions to answer, this is the time to really identify that you need to build some sort of SAM, software asset management program. You need to identify a scope. You need to identify some goals for it, some realistic goals. You need to identify some ways that you're going to measure that and maybe measure the value of it. You need to be able to clearly articulate the risks to business. So, and one of the ways that you can do that is at the beginning of your SAM program, and when you're assessing what you have in your environment, and say, hey, these are 5 publishers that we have significant install base with. These are all very frequent auditors. They all have very complex metrics. If we're off by 20%, it's going to cost us X millions of dollars to be able to deal with that. If we're off by 30%, it's going to cost us this much. So being able to get that, that even that rough sense before you've really rolled up your sleeves and dug into the details, to be able to articulate those risks to senior management is really important. And that's something that Software One, we also help our clients with as well, at risk analysis. Really important when you're building a SAM program, and I've heard this, if I've heard this once, I've heard this 1,000 times. We don't want to boil the ocean. Absolutely not. No one builds a SAM program and says, we're going to do everything. We're going to do every publisher, every location in 3 months. It's just not real. For a large organization, even a medium-sized organization, it's not realistic. So what we need to be able to do is to determine a priority list and say, what are the most important publishers? What are the most important parts of my business that I need to manage, where I've got the greatest risks, I've got the greatest opportunity to be audited and have a poor result, where I'm going to have an unexpected expense. Nobody wants that kind of surprise. So even if you set a priority list of your top 5 to 8 publishers in terms of spend, in terms of audit risk, in terms of auditability, those are where you want to focus first, and make sure that you get things in place, get automation in place if you can around discovery, get automation in place around keeping, tracking, and having access to the documents around those transactions, the contracts, the purchase documents, the invoices, all of that information that's very important, and automation around that license management process. Because these things, if we leave these to be something that's in an Excel spreadsheet somewhere, or something that's on a SharePoint somewhere, and they're very manual, we all know when things are manual like that and they're very complex and they require a lot of manual labor, cannot to get done. These are all things that Software One absolutely helps our customers with every day, and we'd love the opportunity to hear some more specific questions from the folks that have joined us here today, and some opportunities that we may have in the future to help you to do the same kinds of things. So I wanted to close. I'm down to my last couple slides here. So I wanted to just give you guys some practical advice. When you get that request from a publisher, you get the audit letter, you get the invitation to participate in a compliance exercise, a SAM, whatever they want to call it, on that particular day to make it sound friendly. Make sure you have a process for, no matter who receives that, whether it's a DBA sitting somewhere in Hong Kong, or an IT manager that's in Montreal, or the CIO that's in London. Make sure that everybody knows, hey, if I get this, do not stop, do not pass go. Make sure this gets on in the right people's hands immediately. And that will always be, if you've got legal counsel in-house, if you've got attorneys that you use with your business, those folks need to get involved right away, and you need to respond promptly to those requests. Don't think that it's something that you can ignore the first request and maybe they'll just get bored and go away. That's exactly probably the wrong response in that case. So there's a huge value when that audit letter comes in, in having a prompt, organized, assertive response that says, hey, we're prepared. We've got our ducks in a row. We're well managed. We have controls in place. We have this. That can discourage a publisher right off the bat to say, hey, these guys are a well-run shop. They have their ducks in a row. They have their house in order. Yeah, I mean, this may not be such a great opportunity for us. We may negotiate a delay on this or some alternative to going through the full and formal process. Some other things when you get that request, some things to ask that publisher. Audits are particularly, yes, there are copyrights involved. So there's other laws outside of your contract that are involved in most audits because they're enforcing the copyright on their intellectual property. But it's really important to understand when you get a compliance request, under what contract is the publisher making the request? Can they be specific about the contract or contract documents that they're referring to in their request? And maybe you have a response to that in terms of how your organization buys software or manages the software portfolio to determine how you want to respond to that and whether you really think it's reasonable to proceed with the contracts they want, or maybe work out a schedule with that publisher. And what's the scope of that request? Is this a request for a particular country? Is this a request for a particular business unit? And how are they arriving at that scope? The general, all of everything that you have in the world, really, I don't think is a fair scope. And I think it's fair to put that back in your assertive response to that publisher to say, okay, well, help us understand better the scope of your request, the contract that you're interested in, the products that you're interested in, and have them list more detail. The more you can get them to be detailed up front about what it is they're wanting to discuss compliance with you on, the more leverage you're going to have moving into that audit process. Another important thing that will be discussed at this point, and is also actually a really good topic when you're negotiating purchase transactions, who's going to perform this audit, and how will they gather the data for that compliance exercise? Is it going to be the publisher themselves? Have they nominated some third-party consultant or some third-party professional organization or something like that? Those are all things that need to be clarified before this compliance exercise, this audit, can get underway. And the last, and one of the, I think, a really important piece of this before any data is shared or anything really starts is to really to get clarification from the publisher in terms of what are acceptable forms of data as far as showing install base, proving entitlements, and those kinds of things. And will the publisher accept the data from an existing asset management system that you may have in place? So those are some of the basic questions. Obviously, there's other things that you can go into, but I wanted to give you just some of the background if you're kind of predicting potential audit, you have an idea, hey, I might be at risk, and that letter comes across your desk or comes across the desk of somebody in your organization, at least you have some basic things to start with. And this is something that we frequently work with our clients and helping them through this process. Whether they're clients that have been working with us and we've been managing their SAM environments or helping them develop their SAM program for a long time, or whether they're clients that are newer to working with our SAM organization. We're able to help with a lot of this and helping you to craft these responses and make sure that this process can be, one, less disruptive to your business, and make sure that you get a really fair process out of this, so that you don't spend more than you have to. And if you can make it go away, to be assertive and to be able to be prepared to show, hey, this isn't going to be a great big revenue opportunity in this particular situation for compliance. So that kind of wraps up some of my comments. I'm going to hand the floor back over to Daniel Morrison, and he's going to talk through some of the things that we do specifically around software portfolio management and how we help our clients. Daniel?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. If you could just expand the rest of the slide there, I'd really appreciate that.
Oops. Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. This slide's a little... hang on. We may have an animation snafu here with... let me see if I can...
we got it. We're...
Good.
I see now. Well, Rob, first of all, great job, and everybody, that was certainly a lot to take in, a lot of very good and helpful content, and this is being recorded, and we can send this out to you, so if you weren't able to get all the notes down, we'll get this out to you soon, and you can review it again and take it to heart from there. So I just wanted to close out. We're going to take a minute here in a second for some questions and answers with Rob. But just briefly wanted to talk to you for a moment about some of the different ways that SoftwareOne can help our customers. And I want to acknowledge really the busyness of the slide. I understand and can relate to the fact that there's a lot on here. It might be hard to swallow at first. But I wanted to send this out to you because when we do send out the PowerPoint and you look at the recordings, I want you to have a full understanding of all the different services that SoftwareOne can provide to you as an organization. Today we were focusing in on that bottom tier of the compliance and governance, or software asset management, but we also provide a variety of technical services for advisory and making sure that you understand, what's the best technology and what's the proper licensing strategy for the future. Obviously the commercial transactions, but specifically focused on that bottom tier, the compliance and governance, just a few different ways that we're often working with our customers to help them with these sorts of requirements is, first and kind of most obviously would just be compliance assessments. We can come in and run mock audits for you where we would essentially perform the same process that the auditor would perform in a formal audit. The difference being that we can share those results with you, and then not only do that, you don't have to submit a PO right away. We can provide recommendations and help you remediate those gaps. If there's opportunities for uninstallation or reharvesting or renegotiating, we're going to get ahead of that publisher audit and really help you ensure that you're in the right position and that you're prepared for them. This is also something that's very helpful if you have a large true-up or renewal, coming up, especially if you're looking at tweaking or downsizing that contract. If you're doing that with a publisher like Oracle or IBM, you can be sure that an audit may be swift on the heels of that true-up or whatever the situation might be. So compliance assessment, similarly to that, we do provide audit assistance services. So if you find yourself in the midst of an audit, we can come in and provide consulting on how to manage yourselves through that. We provide managed services around software asset management. Finding the right people to manage your assets internally from a software perspective is not easy. There's a lot of different publishers probably in your environment, a lot of complexity, and finding someone that has the breadth of knowledge to manage all these different contracts and licensing rules is very hard. So we can step in and actually take on that responsibility for you, leverage our relationships with the publishers, leverage our influence, and also our understanding of the licensing and manage that for you on an ongoing basis. So that way, let's say on a quarterly basis, we're producing you, compliance reports, we're giving you our recommendations, and really guiding you along on how to be thinking through your decisions for that particular publisher or set of publishers and how you can be, most efficiently leveraging your software. Beyond that, kind of SAM program, software asset management program development, software asset management is really, a blend of people, process, and technology. It's not just about having the right SAM tool in place or a tool to manage and track, inventory and license entitlements, although that's very important. There's also really the software lifecycle of, when an end user in your environment says, I need a piece of software, what's that process that they go through? And so we can work with you to tailor make a program based upon our experience and best practices, so that way you've got the right set of processes, procedures, and workflows to complement the technology. Just a couple more things, and we'll open it up for Q&A. Specialized reporting. A lot of our customers are beginning to work with us for understanding, where their specific software assets are sitting in the life cycle of support from a particular publisher. For instance, Microsoft, with where they're going with Office 365, there's a lot of dependencies between the cloud server or services that are being provided and the client applications that are deployed on a PC, for example. So if you're leveraging Exchange and Office 365, you need to be on mainstream support for whatever version of Office is current at the time. And if that version of Office goes off extended support, well, then you're not going to be able to leverage all of the functionality and feature sets within the Office 365 platform. So helping our customers understand, where they're sitting in the life cycle, so that way they can plan accordingly. Maybe you're sitting here scratching your head saying, wow, this is a lot of really good information, but I have no idea where my risk lies within the organization. We can come and work with you and provide a report based off some very sophisticated scanning technologies that we have, and show you, where your risk lies by understanding your overall software portfolio library within your company. Well, that brings us to the end. So thank you, everybody, for your time. You'll see on there Rob's contact information as well as mine. Again, Daniel Morrison on the sales and kind of account management side. If you have any questions or you want to continue the conversation, or there's a specific requirement within your organization that you'd like to talk through, please feel free to reach out to me. And if you're in a different region than I cover, I will certainly get you in touch with the right folks. But at the end of the day, we've got a strong team, and we'd love to hear from you. And please feel free to reach out to us at your convenience. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. And, thanks again, and we'll look forward to hearing from you all soon. Have a great day.